Hey everybody, it's JJ and we're back again for another ASUS PCDIY hardware live stream. Hopefully everybody's wrapping out the week on a positive and productive footing. Hopefully enjoying your guys' Friday, wherever you might be. We've got a lot of really cool things to be able to go ahead and talk about this week. It's been pretty busy. Of course, for those of you that are part of our ASUS PCDIY group, you've seen, of course, the wide range of announcements, and probably overall, you guys have been aware that, of course, there's been quite a number of new GPUs, and that's probably going to be the big focus for us on today's stream, is actually just touching essentially on the new GPUs that have gone ahead and been announced this week. So we'll give a recap essentially to, of course, the latest generation cards from both AMD and Nvidia, as we do produce both series of graphics cards. Of course, the RX 7600 series of cards, as well as the latest GeForce RTX 4060 Ti series of graphics cards. In addition to that, too, though, we're really excited. Of course, Computex is going to be coming in the not too distant future. We've got a really cool little bit of a teaser for you for our next generation ROG Swift gaming monitor. For those of you that are not aware, ROG Swift is essentially our flagship series of monitors. We've been already busy in 2023, and we've actually launched quite a number of ROG monitors. Our most recent being, of course, the 1440p OLED-based display, and now we just launched last week, of course, our new super ultra wide 49-inch based display. Now we're actually following up with another super ultra wide in the same exact dimensions, 49 inches, where we're actually going to be talking about the brand new QD OLED ROG Swift based monitor. So a lot of really cool things to be able to talk about on today's stream. We've got a couple of UEFI updates for you as well, and we've got actually quite a number of giveaways to go ahead and recap as well. So let's get ready to go ahead and jump into it. Let's see who we have joining us here today on the stream. Let's see, we've got Michael. Fantastic to have you here on the stream, man. Thanks so much for joining us. The one, the only Sniff. Fantastic, man. Thanks for joining us here as well. Happy to have you here. Andy, hey, Andy, fantastic to have you here joining us on the stream. Thanks so much. Yeah, the ROG Ally actually did a recent, actually a little bit of a kind of interview podcast on the ROG Ally. Very, very cool. It's not a component product. It's one of our system products, but it is definitely a very cool handheld gaming product. Vitor is joining us as well. Fantastic to have you here. Erica, always great to have you here on the stream. Thanks for letting us know that the audio is sounding good on your side. We've got CT Bailey here as well. We've got Michael Braun saying hello, and I think that's just a little bit of everybody. Brian Harris, also fantastic. And Bob, hey, fantastic to have you here. Bob, you know what? You get an extra thumbs up from me just because you got a picture of a dog in your profile. All right. Happy to have you here, guys. So let's get ready to go ahead and kick things off and talk about a couple of updates. So first and foremost, just as a general recap again, if you are essentially an AM5 user, if you're not aware, essentially there has been essentially a UEFI update that has been released for all ASUS AM5 based motherboards, actually alongside all motherboard manufacturers. So regardless, if maybe you're using another ASUS component but you don't have an ASUS motherboard, you do want to actually check out your motherboard manufacturer's website to see if they have the latest generation UEFI, which also contains new AGISA, which has been recently issued by AMD. The new AGISA isn't necessarily as critical. The main thing is if you are adopting AM5 and you're utilizing the latest generation series CPUs, there is a new max SoC voltage implementation, and that has been rolled out. So across ASUS's motherboard lineup, every single one of our AM5 motherboards does have a formal UEFI release available for you to go ahead and download. We have complete support documentation on our website that guides you through all the steps that you can update. You can actually update using Easy Flash, you can update using USB BIOS flashback, or you can even update inside of Windows. Not that many people do update inside of Windows, but we do offer it inside of our AI Suite 3 utility. So 3 different ways to get you covered. If you have any questions about that, feel free to go ahead and reach out to our services support team, and they're more than happy to go ahead and help you in that respect if you have any questions. With that though, I do want to go ahead and touch on a few new UEFI updates for AM5, but oddly enough for AM4. So let's get ready to go ahead and touch on this. Give me 1 second to go ahead and bring up my notes here, just because I just had the opportunity to finish checking on these notes, so I didn't have them fully detailed down. So give me 1 second here, and I will bring these up. While I go ahead and bring that up, it looks like we got somebody. Mark is asking us, how about a glossy version of a 27-inch OLED? It is something that for sure we've seen some people have feedback on. You know, the reality is that the vast majority of monitors really for the last 20 years have been all generally some form of matte, and that's just because it's a better solution for the vast majority of users. Glossy is definitely a nice option. It can definitely offer a nice kind of pop to, I think, of the experience, but it can significantly impede, of course, I think, your usage experience with a high level of reflectivity when you talk about kind of ambient light. If you can control your lighting perfectly, great. And it is something we are evaluating. Right now we don't have definitely any products to discuss or disclose saying that we are going to be implementing glossy, but it is something we are evaluating on whether or not you may see a future product from us that does include a display. That being noted, you know, every generation we do carefully kind of evaluate what is called the polarizer. So the polarizer is going to be the actual material that's actually placed in front of the panel to really try to tune it to not only only be able to be performant in terms of handling reflections, but also help to reduce things like off-axis shift that you can also have, and a multitude of other factors, including even the kind of the grain quote-unquote structure. And I think if you actually look at the reviews that you've seen for a 27-inch, a lot of the leading media have not had it be that it's a factor that you should be concerned with. I think it's more so maybe users that are coming from using TVs as opposed to monitors that are seeing that larger preference, but it is definitely something that we are evaluating. So as always, make sure to just keep it tuned, and you'll see if we release anything in the future. All right, let me go ahead and go into our next update here. Lex Luthor, I think you asked me about this last time. Is the PG32UQ still coming? Yes. Like all products, right? It takes time to design, develop, and produce them. And if there's no update, that means there's no update. The best thing I can tell you is always just make sure to watch out for essentially our featured announcement post, or tune into the weekly streams. And that's when we'll provide an update when we're talking about products that are essentially we're releasing into the channel and are essentially going to be available for purchase. If there's sometimes any kind of preliminary or new information, I do post those first and foremost inside of our PCDIY group, which if you guys are checking us out on Facebook or Twitter, you can check out the link in the description and make sure to join us there. I also have a product release calendar that I've created, and that calendar gets intermittently updated about maybe every 2.5 to 3.5 weeks. If there's a new timeline that we're estimating, then I'll go ahead and put it in there. But for anything independent of that, when essentially the information is ready for us to essentially put it out there, we will definitely put it out there. We know there's a lot of people that are interested in that upcoming kind of I don't like using the word budget. Some people use budget because budget can be anything. Budget can be $200,000, $500,000. So budget, I think, is the incorrect term. But I think it's accurate to say that there's a lot of people that are looking for a high performance, lower cost, full array local dimming, mini LED type of monitor, right? Because of course we have our very high end ROG Swift UX based monitor, which is very, very impressive in terms of its performance. But of course it is going to be significantly more expensive than what we project for this upcoming the upcoming UQ XR. So just make sure to keep it tuned, and we'll let you know as soon as we have an update. All right. Okay, so let me see here. So in terms of the UEFI releases, UEFI updates, there's essentially a few. The most important ones that I want to go over are going to be, like I said, starting to see for AM4. So this would be for boards like our Crosshair 8 Formula, Crosshair 8 Hero Wi-Fi, non-Wi-Fi version, the Crosshair 8 Impact, X570 Ace, the Dark Hero, the X570 Extreme Crosshair as well. Any one of those boards, you're essentially going to be seeing essentially an update for them. So let me go ahead and run you through essentially what this update would look like and what it's for. This update I would probably recommend as a moderate kind of update recommendation in terms of you considering. So in most situations, generally the rule of thumb is that if your system is running reliably without any issues, to not update the UEFI unless it's kind of deemed as a critical UEFI. And when we'd say critical, that would be because maybe there's a key issue relative to stability or functionality or security. And so you've seen this kind of in the past where there's a Spectre and Meltdown updates that were issued. And these updates were essentially implemented to be able to help to mitigate essentially security aspects. And so there is essentially a security enhancement implementation that is present within this new AGISA. So let me go ahead and show you what that would look like. So if we head over here in the ROG Crosshair 8 Hero, you can head over to drivers and tools. You can go to BIOS and firmware, you click the button, and then from there you'll see the actual listing right there. Now you'll actually see that this is a brand new AGISA build. So AM4 is already a very mature platform. It's been around for, of course, a few years, and like I said, for the vast majority of users, they've been running it. There's no need for you to change it. But if you do want to take advantage of this new AGISA, the 1.2.0.A release, which, like I said, implements this security vulnerability, which is specific for essentially the AM4 series of processors, then I would recommend that you check that out. And you'll continue to see this new AGISA get rolled out across essentially AM4 series motherboards. So that is going to be essentially right now live for not all of our X570 based motherboards, but for a good chunk of them. If you guys are, of course, part of the PCDIY group, I'll have a featured announcement post that will go up a little bit later that will actually note the more motherboards that we do already have those updates for. And of course, over the coming days, you'll see that expanded to pretty much cover the rest of the motherboard lineup. All right. So that covers us for that quick UEFI update. Hey, Andreas, happy to have you here, man. Thanks so much for joining us here on Friday. Fantastic. Dead BC, I'm not sure what you mean by X3D. If you can help to give me a little bit of context of actually what your question is, then I'll definitely see if I can go ahead and answer it for you, right? David James, I'm upgrading from Z490. So what's a good mid-range gaming Z690, Z790 based motherboard? That's like a little bit tricky because mid-range, I think it depends really on what your budget is. Some people think, one price point is budget and other people don't. So some people could think $500 is budget, and then other people could think $280 is budget, right? For Z790, generally the biggest difference along with Z690 that's going to start to kind of skew you over into one price band versus another price band is probably DDR4 to DDR5. And we have those for essentially both B series chipsets, so B660 and B760, as well as Z690 and Z790. So I think that's the first part is, especially with you being a Z490 user, you could decide, do you just want to carry over your DDR4 memory, which would offer you a very good foundation, still can be very great in terms of its overall performance, or do you really want to make that full shift to DDR5? My usually go-to recommendation for a lot of people is probably going to be our Tough Gaming or Prime Series board. So this board would probably be my recommendation. So the Prime Z790-A, which now also has Wi-Fi. I think it's a great foundation. This one goes for about $280. I'm also a very big fan of the Tough Gaming variant. So let me show you actually that one right here. Tough Gaming, I think, is a really great balance of kind of giving you a lot of the great features and functions, and you're not really losing out on anything. You get, a great level in terms of the functionality and the feature set. So this is going to be the Tough Gaming Z790, and we offer this one in both a DDR4 and a DDR5. You can see it's $280, but really, you're going to have 4 M.2 slots on here. You got your USB-C 20 gigabits. You also have Wi-Fi on there, 2.5 gigabit networking, robust VRM, great thermal performance, really nice ID design. There's not really, I think, anything that you would be negating. You also are going to have, your even nice little things like our Q release technology, which is a nice ejection button mechanism so that you can easily remove your graphics card. A lot of little nice things that are going to be present on there. So the only thing that you will miss out on that you may want to kind of keep in mind in terms of bumping yourself up to a higher end board would be whether or not you want PCI Express Gen 5 for your M.2 SSDs. Now this board already has 4 of them, which is quite a bit, but you need to jump up a little bit more if you're going to want to consider getting a PCI Express Gen 5 native SSD support. Now these drives are just starting to come to the market. And it's not critical. Right now, the reality is even from a Gen 3 to Gen 4 drive, the experience for kind of most users and for gaming is almost parity. You really have to be doing a little bit more kind of advanced workflows, a lot of read and write copying tasks to see a genuine difference between those two drives. This may change, in a couple years as you start to see direct storage get implemented in more games, but that'll really be up to you on whether or not you feel that that's kind of a beneficial specification that you want in terms of adding value to your kind of your build essentially over time. So this would probably be my recommendation. I think it's a great choice. And if you also don't need overclocking support for the CPU, then you could definitely actually go even less than this, and you could get like a B760 or a B660 series motherboard with still a really good set of specifications. So those would be my recommendations for you. Hopefully that helps you in terms of kind of laying down a foundation for what might make sense for you. Okay. All right, let me go ahead and see right here. Hey, Colton. Actually, a vast majority of users actually have no issues in regard to the HDR performance with the PG27 AQD-M. That being noted, I actually have already posted about this in our PCDIY group. We do actually have a new calibration process in place, which we think will help to further enhance the HDR rendering performance. There are still factors that users have to keep in mind, like the experience can vary depending on the content. Not all the games natively support it. Are you running the actual calibration tool? There's a lot of kind of pieces to the conversation when you talk about HDR experience, and even the transition from users kind of understanding elements from older technologies to newer technologies and how they work in terms of calibrating them and working with them correctly. But we do actually have a forthcoming specific HDR essentially improvement firmware. We're projecting to probably release that probably within the next couple of weeks. So we'll have actually an announcement in the PCDIY group, and I'll definitely talk about it in this stream when we do issue it. Our goal is hopefully to release it, I think maybe, like I said, within the next 14 days or so. So make sure to keep it tuned in that regard. Still, regardless, you still need to run through the actual calibration process, ideally to make sure that you maximize the experience resident to the games that you're running. And also, critically, an oversight that we see some users are essentially having when they move over to an HDR monitor and they've never had an HDR monitor before is you want to run HDR when you're actually running HDR content. Some people are running HDR all the time. And while you can attempt to essentially make HDR work fairly okay within an SDR environment, which would be Windows, you don't actually want to run in HDR mode within an SDR environment. So Windows Desktop is an SDR environment. It's not an HDR environment. So some people kind of find that challenging in terms of kind of having to switch back and forth, but that is the reality of just the way that the environments are designed. Until you have a situation where everything is essentially rendered in HDR, you're always going to have to kind of switch back and forth between the two. But rest assured, we are committed to essentially maximizing the performance and even making it better. So we'll have that future update. And then we also even have a future HDR update for our ROG Swift large format monitors. So that would include the PG42 and the 48. So those will be out again a little bit later after that 27-inch HDR-based display update. All right. Let me see another quick questions right there. What about the ROG Strix F? That would be a great choice. The ROG Strix F is going to be a kind of a unilaterally update. So everything is going to be better on that motherboard than it would be on the tough gaming model. So you're not going to get anything that's less. It's only going to be more. You're going to get more I/O. You're going to even get a higher performing VRM. The audio is better. I mean, every single aspect of that board is essentially going to be upgraded. So that's a great choice if you have that within your budget. I think the F is a fantastic choice if you want to move up. And one of the really cool things I love about that board that the tough gaming board doesn't have is it features our ASUS AIOC technology. So if you want an easy way to essentially be able to take advantage of your K-series CPU, if that's what you're going to be moving into, along with your cooler, it will allow you to essentially have an easy and effective and efficient overclock that's matched to your CPU and to your cooling solution. And you don't have to do anything except just run gaming for an hour and then go ahead and enable it. And then bam, you're going to have a really nice per-core overclock that's specific to your cooler and your CPU. So a really cool feature that's on the F. All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump into our next update. Again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat. We'll definitely get into them. Let me go ahead and start ready to go into some of our giveaways here. And we'll go from there. Give me 1 second here. All right, so next up, let's actually do a quick partner news update. So give me 1 second right here. And we will go ahead and talk about this. So our friends over at EK have gone ahead and actually released a cool new update specifically for our latest generation chassis, which is going to be for the GR701, the Hyperion. And so if you guys are not aware of that, that is essentially our largest chassis. It's really been designed for users that are looking for kind of very high-end base builds. They may be going with a custom water cooling. They may not be going with custom water cooling, but they definitely want something distinct and performant. It has a lot of room and has a specialized ID design. Lots of connectivity. That's what the GR701 is all about, the Hyperion, and that's what our friends at over EK have now gone ahead and essentially designed and developed a distro block. So go ahead and bring up the images here. I should have them here. 1 second. I thought I had them separated. 520. I guess I don't have them. Okay. No worries. We can just show you straight off their page here. So you guys can see right here, if you're not familiar, essentially, distro block is just a really nice, clean, integrated fashion of having essentially your pump and your reservoir and a streamlined way to be able to essentially route all your runs, right? Essentially your tubing. I'm personally not that much of a fan of hardline. I think it can look fantastic. I prefer actually just the simplicity, the lower cost, and the streamlined nature of essentially soft tubing. But and you could do technically soft tubing with this, but it's definitely more common to see people do hardline based runs. It is a beautiful looking design though, really nice in terms of its finish. Of course, it's all CNC done to be really precise and accurately fit in there. You can see actually how it fits inside of the Hyperion. It looks fantastic, essentially runs in here. The way that the Hyperion is designed is this right here is what's called an RGB light panel. And so you can essentially either put fans in there or you can take the light panel out and you can actually use the light panel on your desk because it can connect to your computer via USB. It's a cool little just kind of accessory that you can have when you're using this space for either fans or for something like this distribution plate. In terms of course space, you have tons of space inside the Hyperion right here. You can essentially put a 420 millimeter radiator or 420 millimeter radiator here. And of course you can support pretty much all of our hardware. So it doesn't matter whether you want to go with something like a 360 Ryu or you want to go with of course a Ryu Jin. But if you're going to get this, you're going to be going with custom water cooling. So that means you're probably going to be water cooling the GPU, water cooling the CPU, and your rest of your components. So overall, a very cool design that you have. You can see it again right there, fully supportive in terms of ASUS Aura Sync, so connects directly to just one of the 3-pin headers on the motherboard, and then you can control or synchronize it through the Armory Crate software suite, and you're going to be good to go. So I will go ahead and drop the link down here in the chat if you're interested. So let me go ahead and drop that in there for you guys. And let me know, are you guys fans of distro plates? or do you prefer soft tubing? All right. Hey Dukes, happy to have you here, man. So Kevin says soft tubing all day. Yeah, I gets my thumbs up. Again, I've got no problems with hardline. I think hardline can be really nice. Personally for me, also I'm actually a fan of split designs, and a lot of people don't actually like split designs. And what I mean by that is I actually generally find that I would rather prioritize water cooling just my CPU and leaving my GPU not actually water cooled, especially with our cards where you have such performant actually cooling solutions. To me, the value of actually stripping off the entire heatsink assembly and going with a water block isn't really worth it. If you want the aesthetics, and of course definitely can even be lower temperatures, but consider our tough gaming graphics cards, our ROG Strix cards come with really performant thermal solutions in there, so you're already talking sometimes 15-20 degrees lower than let's say reference or similar reference type designs, so you're already really getting very cool and quiet operation. So for me, I find that I'm going to benefit most from the CPU, plus if I want to get access to slots and things like that on my motherboard, having the card not blocked makes it much easier, because especially when you go with a hard align configuration, it can become really challenging to kind of access anything on the motherboard, because you literally have to kind of remove certain things and readjust everything just to be able to have access to maybe certain items, which is another reason why I'm not always the biggest fan of like a vertical mount. But again, something like this distro plate, the Matrix 7 kind of concept that EK has allows you to really integrate everything really straight and fitted to be able to ensure that you're having a really nice level of compatibility. So it's a very cool accessory to be able to see offered by our friends over there. Bob notes is that I would do split myself. Cool. Yeah, very cool. Hey Dukes, I believe we're actually going to LTX. I'm not 100% sure, but make sure to just watch our social media channels for updates right there. Kevin Daly also notes says my ROG Glacial. So this actually might be one of the actual lucky users that was able to get the Glacial on like a crazy closeout kind of promo deal, because it's an out of production board. It's an older chipset, but it's still an amazing motherboard. Of course, when it came out, it was over $1,000, and I think some users got this for sub $200. Still working on installing it in the Helios. It looks good though. Very cool. Benny is asking actually about post time. So before I go to my next update, let me go ahead and just answer that a little bit. So why does my Prime Z795 board post longer than my Z790 gamer board? So that's actually a really good question. Post time is actually complex. A lot of users think just because you go to newer hardware that your post time should be essentially faster. Even with a faster SSD, your SSD doesn't have anything to really almost do with the post time. Your SSD has to do with the boot, not with your post, and they're two separate things. A lot of people get confused and they use the word boot when they're talking about the post, and the post is the power on self-test. It's the initialization when your system is looking at all your hardware. And actually, as you move to newer platforms and you actually move to higher and higher hardware configurations, actually the likelihood of your post time going up becomes a higher level. Why is that? Well, one, if you go to a platform that has like DDR5, you have higher density memory. Higher density memory always takes longer to do training. On probably your old motherboard, you maybe had like one maybe M.2 slot, right? Now on new motherboards, you can have 3 or 4 slots, right? You can have more rear USB ports. You have more read drivers. You have maybe an internal hub pass through this, multiplexing out different I/O ports. There's essentially more that the board has to simultaneously address and initialize at one time. And that can be really challenging to do that quickly and reliably. You could attempt to essentially kind of brute force it, but that isn't optimal for essentially what's called timeout. When you're going through the actual power on cycle, you want to allow enough time for certain devices to essentially be able to be registered, initialized, and detected. And so it could really vary. Some boards, depending on the permutation of the configuration that you have, so like I said, the memory, are you overclocking the memory? Are you overclocking the CPU? That'll probably extend your post time. You can easily compare that. You can go from defaults, or you can test it with overclocks. The number of devices that you have physically installed on the motherboard, right? The number of I/O devices you have connected on the rear, all of these influence factors. So this system, I can tell you here, I can post very quickly in here, right? But it's probably a different configuration than you. So it really depends. And so it's quite challenging. Another thing too is, of course, your OS environment, your devices do play a part. Keep in mind the fastest posts will also always happen with all of a native UEFI environment. So sometimes there are devices that are non-native UEFI. That means that the motherboard might have to work in a legacy CSM mode, which could also extend its post time. So there's a lot of really tricky things that you kind of have to keep in mind in relation to the post. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit more. All right. All right. So, hey, DePoets, man, fantastic to have you here, man. Hopefully you're enjoying your Friday, man. You're doing well. So let me go ahead and jump into the next item right here. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about some awesome giveaways that we've got going with our friends. So let's go ahead and jump into these. So give me 1 second and we'll get into some cool giveaways. All right. See here, what's going to be first? I think let's do some graphics cards, right? Since we're going to be talking about graphics cards today, why not do some graphics cards? I think that'll be pretty exciting for a lot of people. So first one is going to be our power couple giveaway, and this is going to be a worldwide giveaway. And pretty much what do you have the opportunity to win here? You got the opportunity to win some awesome graphics cards as well as some awesome power supplies. So of course, ASUS being a leader in both these categories, it's pretty cool to be able to see. So what can you win? Let's go ahead and take a look at the prize list. You can see we've got, that's literally the best of the best right there, an ROG Strix GeForce RTX 4090, a Tough Gaming RTX 4090, that beautiful white edition ROG Strix 4080, that cool and quiet and really, really beautiful looking Noctua card, the 4080 edition, and then also an ROG Strix 4070 Ti. So absolutely some awesome graphics cards on there. Power supplies, a little bit of everything, and pretty much across the board from our latest generation and some of our prior generation power supplies. So from our latest generation Thor, this is the P2 series, so 1000 watt and 850 watt. These guys, of course, are going to be outstanding in terms of their power efficiency, quietest PSUs in their class. There's nobody that's offering quieter PSUs than we are. Another thing that a lot of people forget about, these come actually with individually sleeved cables. Individually sleeved cables are not cheap. It's quite a bit more expensive to buy them independently, and some people wonder, why is the Thor more expensive? It's not only because it has the OLED display, it has larger heat sinks, it has a premium build topology, right? But it also even includes individually sleeved cables, which is pretty cool. Got our ROG Strix Gold series. This is the 850 and 750. These are the older models, but this is the newer model right here. This is the new upcoming Strix ATX 3.0 version power supply that we have. So the 1000 watt gold edition. Then we also have the Tough Gaming 1000 watt. That's also ATX 3.0. And that also comes with some really, really nice premium, what we call fully etched cables. Those cables are really nice. Very similar to, I think, some very nice high quality, again, individually sleeved cables. They're a little bit different, but they're really nice and supple. They're very malleable. They're really, really nice. Again, I think that I'm biased, but I think they're the best PSU cables that come with a power supply out of the box. And then we also have a white edition power supply. So what do you need to do to get on it? You pretty much just have to go through this little entry portal, put in your information, say which is your favorite graphics card, kind of put some of that information in there, and you are entered in to be able to win essentially some awesome hardware. So that's all you got to do. Pretty simple. So let me go ahead and share that link with you guys. It's a great opportunity. If you have been hoping to maybe be able to get a graphics card, but maybe it's not right now in your budget, why don't you go ahead and jump into that giveaway, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and drop that one in the chat right there. All right, guys, I've gone ahead and dropped that one in the chat there. Are they... I'm not sure what you mean by what out of the box. If you can clarify for me, that would be great. But we'll see. Somebody asking about the future 16 gigabyte version. We'll have more information on the 16 gigabyte version, so make sure to keep it tuned there once we essentially get a little bit closer to that. All right. Next up here, let's go ahead and go into our next giveaway. This one's going to be pretty cool. This one's actually for a full, essentially kind of a gaming build. So this one's pretty sweet. So let me go ahead and bring this one up here too. And see if I think I have an image for this one. So give me 1 second. All right, very, very cool. So this is one that we're actually running with our friends Robitech, as well as from Andy the Lab. Really, really cool kind of extreme PC makeover. And this one's a pretty big prize pool. Okay, guys, so this is going to be running until June 11th, right? And so what do you need to do is submit a video telling us about your dad or grad and why you believe they deserve to win this PC makeover, right? And when we mean a PC makeover, this is a legit full PC makeover, because what are you going to have the opportunity to win? It's a massive range of hardware right here. So this is going to be an ROG Maximus Z790 Hero. So that's pretty much one of our flagship Z790 motherboards. We then have an ROG Strix GeForce RTX 4080 base graphics card, so the best of the best when it comes to the 4080, a 13900K series CPU, the latest, not even the Radeon 2, but the Radeon 3. So the Radeon 3 ARGB 360, that's with the 8th Gen Asetek pump, that's with our brand new magnetic daisy chain based fans, the actually faster and more fluid display. I mean, it's absolutely going to be pretty much the benchmark amongst all AIO coolers on the market is going to be the Radeon 3. Really, really exciting. The Hyperion. You get the whole Hyperion chassis, an ROG Thor PSU, our ROG Strix XF120 fans, which are fantastic, high performance, just simple black fans, but they feature a premium maglev bearing. If you don't know, basic fans, a lot of you know the RGB fans out there that are very popular that people use in their builds, maybe have a rating of about 50 to 80,000 hours. Maglev bearing fans carry a rating of 400,000 hours. So they're significantly more reliable. And a key difference is they operate essentially with the same performance in different axes, so different positions, where traditional bearings can have issues depending on how they're actually mounted, and it can affect their lifespan as well as their tone. It's also part of the reason why premium fans, also like what we have with our Tough Gaming ARGB fan, or from other companies you see from like Noctua that use a more premium, what's called self-lubricating bearing, is one of the big reasons why those are much more expensive than a lot of the other standard fans on the market. All right, and then you're also going to have our flagship gaming chair, our ROG SL400 Ergo gaming chair. That gaming chair is a fantastic option. $800 for that gaming chair alone, right? I mean, we're talking already thousands of dollars of hardware right here. Our brand new XG49WCR, so that's our brand new super ultra wide monitor, right? 5140 by 1440 base monitor. It's like having two 27-inch monitors side by side. The ROG Azoth keyboard, our flagship gaming keyboard, right? Our ROG Harp Ace mouse, right? Again, our flagship Suture ultralight mouse, and then the ROG Delta S Animate headset. Again, our flagship gaming headset. That's pretty insane. That's a massive, essentially. That's a full makeover, right? So again, if you're interested in it, get in on it. So let me go ahead and drop that link in the chat there. Okay, all right, let me go ahead and drop our next giveaway right here. So we've got one other giveaway. And for this giveaway, this is also going to be for monitors over there too. So this one's going to be pretty sweet, guys, right here. So this one, essentially, we are going to be giving away right here the ROG Swift PG27AQDM. So if you're actually interested in winning one of these monitors, we're actually going to be giving 3 of these away. Again, you just have to go into the entry opportunities. So if you've been, again, dreaming maybe about getting into some OLED, you know, for me, OLED isn't necessarily the end all or be all, right? And even for us as a manufacturer, right, we're actually very adamant that we think that LCD can actually be just as actually good, and in some situations actually even better. If you talk about like text sharpness, text clarity, even color gamut can actually be higher on LCD based displays. You can actually have even higher level of motion clarity also on a higher refresh rate LCD like our 360 hertz or even our upcoming 540 hertz based displays. It really comes down to what are you looking for, but OLED unquestionably has outstanding pixel response. It sets the bar when it comes to, of course, contrast. It has really the most consistency when it comes to also pixel response because of its self-emissive nature, and it's an absolutely beautiful display for really gaming and content. So if you don't really need a monitor for mixed usage, like for me, I'm doing a lot of mixed usage. I'm doing everything from some editing, so some reading online, going back and forth, maybe playing some games, going to general applications. I need a monitor that's going to perform for me in all of those scenarios, and LCD still really is the best in that type of mixed mode scenario. But if really, you know, I'd say doing 70% gaming or more, or you're doing content consumption, right, in that high percentage, you're not really using the monitor from a desktop usage standpoint, then OLED, I think, is a fantastic option for you because of the items that we talked about here. So again, here, awesome display that you can pick up, you know, through this giveaway. So 3 of them, and you can see 4 days left. So if you're interested, make sure to go ahead and get on it. I'm going to drop that link in the chat there as well. All right, there you guys go. So if everybody can just go ahead and confirm for me that those giveaways have gone ahead and been listed there in the chat, that would be fantastic. I just want to make sure that all of them are listed in there, and we will be good to go. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and go into our next item here, and we will go from there. So next up, I've got a cool, just exciting update. So Computex is going to be coming up. If you guys are not familiar with Computex, it is essentially probably like the biggest PC-centric show that happens every year. And now as we're finally kind of exiting the pandemic, right, we're getting back to some level of normalcy, right? You're starting to see these shows come back into place, and it's exciting for, I think, a Computex 2023. I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you there's a massive amount of new hardware that we are going to be showing off. Some of it is going to be brand new in terms of conceptual, and there's other kind of stuff that's going to be formal products that are going to be coming out in the not too distant future. We've got a fantastic lineup of really cool things that we're going to be showing off at Computex 2023. And to be able to kind of kick this off, Computex already did go ahead and release essentially their Computex Golden Award winners. And so ASUS has historically been really one of the leaders in terms of actually getting recognized for, you know, our features, our functions, our designs, our innovative kind of product focus. And there's one really cool update that we've got for essentially one of these Golden Award winners. So let's go ahead and show you this new little bit of a teaser display that we have coming up here. So this guy is going to be an upcoming display from us, and we are going to be showing off more of it at Computex. This is going to be for those of you that are interested in a super ultra wide based display. So this is the ROG SWIFT PG49WCD. This will be our first QD OLED based display. So we already have quite a number of OLED displays. We have a 13-inch, we have a 15-inch, we've got then a 27-inch, we then have a 32-inch, a 42-inch, and a 48-inch. So we have a lot of OLED based displays, but this will be our first QD OLED display. This is going to be utilizing the same new ID design that we just introduced for the 27-inch OLED based display, where you can definitely see that present within the base and the actual rear design. It's also got these cool little accent pieces, which if you may or may not notice, things like the tripod mount is on there. We have that top mounted USB. That makes it really flexible and cool in terms of being able to add things like a light, a microphone, a camera, even actually a secondary monitor, maybe like one of our MB or XG series portable monitors, and then you could double stack a monitor on top of a monitor, right? Some pretty cool stuff there. Again, this is really going to be for those that are maybe looking for that multi-monitor experience, but what in one single display. So some other quick specifications here outside of the resolutions. You're talking about 5140 by 1440. This will be a high refresh rate gaming display. Of course, it has that ultra low pixel response thanks to that QD OLED technology. And I can go ahead and also tell you that this will be featuring actually an HDR 1000 nit rating. We are also going to be incorporating the same kind of technology that you're known for with our high-end ROG Swift series monitors. So that includes things like a heatsink design and actually graphene film. This is there to help to maximize the overall lifespan and the performance of the panel, help to mitigate burn-in. And there's a lot of other cool stuff that we'll be talking about once we actually get to the formal announcement for this display. So I guess question in the chat is, are you excited about this QD OLED display, or maybe you still excited about some of the other displays that we have coming down the pipeline that we've announced, whether that's going to be things like the UQXR, which is going to be, of course, that HDMI 2.1 and DP 2.1 4K high refresh rate gaming monitor with full array local dimming that uses that tried and true LCD technology, as well as, who knows, some other technologies that might be coming out in the not too distant future when it comes to monitors as well. So some cool stuff going on there, and just a little bit of a teaser in terms of what we have coming on for Computex. All right. So Michael goes, is the QD OLED better than OLED? So not necessarily. The subpixel structure is still going to be not necessarily ideal. If you still really kind of ideally care, I think, about sharpness, you know, I will reserve this to say until we get to our final production sample. You know, feedback will definitely provide that within the community. I'd like to try to have the users be very understanding of, you know, what is going to serve them best, right? And so that's why I tell people, if you really care about text sharpness, you know, OLED is fantastic, but it's not going to be better than an LCD, right? So again, some of that can also kind of be overcome once you kind of get used to it. And some people are okay, some people are not okay. And that's also a little bit because different people have different vision levels, right? As far as the acuity of how they actually look at text. And even things like the PPI can be a factor too. Take, for instance, like a larger format display. Right, depending on the actual size of that display, the PPI might not be ideal, and so you can definitely notice the pixels. So that's like a great example of that. Is like, I actually really like 4K at 27 inches. There's a lot of users that don't like 4K at 27 inches. They feel that it's too actually dense. But me, I absolutely love the sharpness. It's absolutely a really sharp display, and it absolutely looks fantastic. 32 can still look really good, but I really love actually the sharpness there. So again, some of this is going to be dependent on your preferences and what you're looking for, right? Let me go ahead and see right here. Question here is one: what if Nvidia or AMD creates a card that can push 4K 360 hertz monitor? I can't speak to AMD or Nvidia in terms of what products they have in terms of design or development. 4K 360 hertz, there's nothing like that on the market right now in terms of monitor technology. You're only right now just starting to finally see more monitors come out with HDMI 2.1, as well as now the new DP 2.1. I believe will probably be the first monitor manufacturer with a DP 2.1 based display on the market. So it's still going to be some time, but I think also, you have to interestingly really look at frame generation technology, things like DLSS3, along with, of course, faster performing GPU architecture, which will help to be able to offer that type of performance. But the game engine is really going to be a big factor to that, right? So when people talk about like 4K gaming or 1080p gaming or 1440p, the reality is the game diversity that exists is so large. I really do feel you almost have to preference that with what are you actually gaming, right? What are you playing? Because the difference between, let's say, Cyberpunk to Ori and the Blind Forest to Forza to Company Heroes to Spider-Man is quite different actually across all of those games when you're playing them all at 4K, right? So it really does come down to what is your actual intent in terms of what you're playing, and that will help to define, whether you should be waiting on a GPU, whether that GPU exists, right, or anything else along those lines. So there's a lot of different factors to keep in mind, right? All right. PGPC says, as for 4K gaming, I've been loving the ROG Swift 42-inch OLED. Yeah, that's a fantastic display, especially if, like you say, you're going to set it up and just enjoy that large format gaming experience. It's a great display to be able to just enjoy for large format gaming, right? The product, hey Alex, is the product page up for that new OLED? I don't believe we actually have it up yet, so just make sure to go ahead and keep it attuned in that respect. Okay guys, so that is going to be a quick update that we have there. And also I do want to go ahead and touch on that some people that if you're interested in that display, do keep in mind that we also do have the XG49WCR, which we just announced last week. So we do actually have two different versions that are available. I know for some people, they're going to be specifically on the OLED. I want maybe bandwagon might be kind of the term that sometimes people use. But we do also just launched this display right here, the ROG Strix XG49WCR. So this is also a 49-inch, right, a super ultra wide 5120 by 1440 curved 165 hertz display. Display HDR 4000. So unlike the, of course, the QD OLED, which will be brighter, this will still offer you a fantastic experience, and in some ways more consistent experience, because if you just use this purely as an SDR display, it's going to be a great experience, and it will have higher than standard SDR based brightness. It does also have USB-C connectivity, DisplayPort 1.4, and a smart KVM technology, and even RJ45 connectivity, which is pretty cool. So that means that, like, even if you want to connect optionally like another device like a laptop or something like that, you could have your Ethernet and that could be passed through the cable and you could be good to go. And this one is right now shipping to the market, coming in at about $1,000 in terms of the overall display right here. So again, if you're also looking as another alternative, we'll kind of have these two different options. So I will say this will be kind of like the more, let's say, general option, which is surprising to say for such a large super ultra wide monitor like this, that you're talking about this price point. But of course, if you want to move up to, let's say, a real HDR gaming class monitor, because the QD OLED will offer you essentially an HDR 1000 nit rating, then you would want to step up to the ROG Swift version. And so that is a key thing that you can differentiate. This is the XG, so ROG Strix, while the other one is an ROG Swift PG. So PG is always our flagship series gaming monitors. Okay, so keep in mind, if you're interested in a super ultra wide, we also do have this monitor available. Okay, all right. Let me go ahead and see if there's any other quick questions on there. If there's not, then I think we'll go from there. All right. Next up right here, we've also got something kind of cool here. So I'm just going to go ahead and share this with you guys. This is another little bit of a teaser that we have coming in at Computex right here. So this is going to be a little something. What does that look like? That may or may not look like a keyboard switch. So for many of you know, one of the things that we have essentially put out is going to be our ROG essentially switches, and so we do essentially have a new set of peripherals that will be coming out, along with some new exciting updates that will be coming out too. So this is going to be our next generation ROG switch. So right now we have our ROG NX switches, which you'll find are essentially kind of similar to Cherry, where they actually offer a optimized, let's say, actuation and reset point. They also offer really outstanding reliability, semi-lubricated based design. We then have our RX based switches, which are my personal favorite compared to the NX switches because they offer even superior stability. They're an optical based switch, and because of the 4-point stem design, they really allow for a great experience that it's very difficult to mirror this in even a custom keyboard. In a custom keyboard, you'd have to go with some form of box switch, have to have PBT switches, and they'd have to be tightly toleranced to be able to get the main benefit, which is very little keycap wobble. And so I'm a really big fan of the RX switches, but if you're looking for something else, make sure to keep it tuned, because at Computex we're going to be having some more updates when it comes to our keyboards and to our switches. So some cool stuff going on there. All right, guys. Hey Dukes, I'm not sure what your issue is, but if you got any issues, feel free to go ahead and reach out to our service and support team. You can go ahead and reach out to them via the ASUS app. So we actually have an app that you can download in Windows, or you can do it on your phone. That'll allow you to go ahead and kick off, let's say, any inquiries to our service and support team. We also have live chat outside of email. We also have phone number if you go ahead and contact us within normal, essentially, operating hours. Whatever it might be, though, feel free to go ahead and reach out to our service and support team, and they will help you out with whatever your issue may be when it comes to that. If you're looking maybe for some general guidance, you can also feel free to join our PCDIY group. I would just ask that you actually use our support template. We actually have a support template. But if you have a hardware-based issue, please reach out to our service and support team, and they're more than willing to go ahead and help you out, get you taken care of, so that you can go ahead and get back up and running. Okay? All right, guys. So let's go ahead and I think wrap that up in terms of just some quick teasers that we have there. And now let's go ahead and jump into some, I'd say, some new graphics cards. All right, guys. So here, let's go ahead and I guess probably go first up. We'll go first with AMD. So let's go ahead and talk about the RX 7600 series of graphics cards. So give me a second to go ahead and bring up these images right here. And so this card, I think, is going to be best suited for those of you that are probably going to be either one, maybe building or upgrading, and you maybe have an older system. Maybe you've got a little bit more of a limited budget in terms of the actual price point when it comes to what you can actually upgrade to your graphics card. Now, this is going to be a card that is going to be well suited for 1080p gaming, as well as even for moderate 1440p gaming. You know, when we talk about the overall average FPS performance, it's pretty strong. You're going to be looking at probably 1080p gaming with modern titles, and this is all with rasterization. So that means that essentially you're not using any technology like, let's say, Radeon Super Resolution or FSR, things along those lines, at about a little over 100 frames for, let's say, 1080p. And then when you're talking about probably 1440p, probably about 75 frames. So still even at 1440p, it is definitely going to be a capable card. And to give you an example, I mean, if we take a look, let's say like a Forza, one of my favorite games, you'd be talking about Forza, you know, in probably like 75 frames, even at 1440p, right? You know, but you could jump into, of course, a game like Doom, and in Doom, you'd probably be like at 100 and probably like 40, 150 plus frames. So it just all depends, again, your game engine, your settings. Those are all going to be factors that you have to account for. You're also going to get an update to a new media engine support, where you're going to have, of course, AV1, which is going to be great for if you're streaming or doing a lot of video decoding, a lot of video encoding. And you do have specification support for the newest technologies. So if you're maybe on something like a GTX 9 series, a GTX 10 series, even I'd say a mid-range, maybe 20 series card, or you've got definitely older AMD-based graphics card solutions, right? So, you know, maybe 7900 series, right? 5000 series, something in that class, then definitely you would want to probably be maybe looking at here as being a good option. So most users usually upgrade every about 3 to 4 to 5 years for the graphics card. So depending on where you're at, this could be a solid option. So let's go ahead and take a look and see which cards we are going to be offering. We're going to have, let's bring up the Dual first. So let me go ahead and bring this up. and this will be our dual series. Okay, and so right off the bat, you can see it's got a really nice clean black backplate right here. So of course it's going to look really nice and clean in that respect. You'll see that it's dual, so that means of course it's a two fan based design. This will help to keep the card cool and quiet in terms of its overall performance. It is our new AxialTech ring barrier based fan, so those means that they're static pressure optimized to have a little bit more focused airflow to the heatsink and fan assembly that goes on the inside of the card right there. There's no RGB lighting right there, so it's just a clean all black design. Works well for pretty much any type of build. A bit more compact in terms of its profile, so it's easy to pretty much fit in just about any type of chassis environment, so you don't really have to be worried about dimensions. In terms of the rear I/O connectivity, you can see you've got DP, 3 of those, and then HDMI, and that HDMI is HDMI 2.1 in terms of its specification support. Another thing that I do like, especially with this card, is also going to be the fact that it is utilizing the legacy 8-pin PCI Express power connector. That's just going to be great because in terms of the overall flexibility for you as an upgrader, if you're taking an older system, you don't have to have a new power supply or you have to use any adapter cables. You can pretty much just slot this in and you're going to be good to go, and you don't have to worry about that. And even those of you that might maybe have more moderate power supplies, so you know, maybe at 500 watt, 550 watt, 600 watt, 650 watt, you're going to be entirely fine with powering this graphics card with that type of wattage. So that is going to be our first offering in terms of the Dual RX 7600. Okay, so let me go ahead and just confirm for you here pricing. I'll show you that right here. And we're going to then go into the ROG Strix model. For the dual model, you're going to see that that's going to be coming in at $279.99 in terms of the overall price point. So next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the ROG Strix model. The ROG Strix model is going to be a higher end model that we will have available. It is still utilizing the same GPU. The main upgrade, of course, is going to be a higher performing VRM, a higher performing thermal solution. So that's going to mean the heatsink and the fan assembly. Essentially, that's just going to give you lower temperatures. You're also going to have an improvement in terms of the actual base clock speeds that the card comes in. So that gives you a little bit of bump up in terms of the overall operating performance for the graphics card. Similar in terms of 2-fan design that you're also going to have on here. When you do actually look at the side profile, you can actually see quite a bit more heat pipes in here because that's, of course, a much more performant heatsink and fan assembly that we have on this design. Still 8-pin power connection on this model as well, and this one will step it up to actually integrate RGB lighting. So this does have RGB lighting control. You can customize the lighting, so if you want it to be like red or rainbow or green, blue, white, whatever it is, you're good to go. And it does fully support ASUS Aura Sync. All right, on the back, you also, of course, are going to have that backplate design just like you have also on the Dual, so it looks really nice in that respect. You will also see that this card does integrate essentially our Dual V BIOS design. If you don't know what that is, essentially just means that the card essentially has 2 operating profiles. One is performance mode and one is quiet mode. For most users, probably just leave it on performance mode. It's still going to be very quiet, but for users that are maybe super critical or maybe have a more compact system, maybe a system that's like right next to them, you can easily toggle it into Q mode. Now, you can always tweak and tune the fan curves inside of the GPU Tweak software, which allows you to go ahead and monitor and tweak and tune the graphics card, whether it's clock frequencies, fan curves, or all that good stuff. But if you want kind of just an easy hardware approach, you can flip the switch and you're going to be good to go. And the rear display I/O configuration is going to be the same. So you've got DisplayPort, 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 and HDMI also on the RX 7600. All right. I'm not sure what you mean by ride. Duke, I don't drive, so if that's what you mean by that, I don't even have a ride in that respect, so nothing. Vitor, I think, is noting, it likes the look of the card. I think, yeah, definitely has a nice aesthetic right there. Pidgey PCs is giving some feedback. It's a good looking little card, great for 1080p 1440p gaming system. Exactly. I think, you know, again, for somebody that's maybe just building a system, maybe you want to pair this with something like a B760, B660 based motherboard, something like a 12100, 12400, or 13100, 13400 series processor. Maybe you still want to go with DDR4 based memory, or like I said, maybe you've got a system 3, 4, 5 years old and you're just looking to upgrade to, let's say, a little bit more of a performant, well, it could actually be quite a bit more performant GPU depending on on what you're upgrading to, I think this is a very, very solid choice. Same thing also, I think now with the new A620 series motherboards that are now a new entry point for AM5 builders, and then maybe something like a Ryzen 7600 series CPU, this could be a great choice. Or also AM4. AM4, you're still seeing great discounts on the CPUs. We still have B550 based motherboards, and I think B550 paired with something like a Ryzen 5600X, or even if you still want to go with something on that higher end for kind of like performance to kind of like combination configuration, you can still go up to stuff like the 5800X3D, which is a very performant CPU, still outstanding even with the latest generation from both AMD and Intel. So a lot of options, you know, however you want to end up going about this. All right, so overall pretty cool. Rama Gaming is going, any hints on the ProArt availability? As I noted actually in our launch live stream when we talked about the ProArt series model, it's going to have actually a 1-month exclusivity period with our actually powered by ASUS system integrator partner Falcon Northwest. So you actually see channel availability show up, I believe probably at the very end of June as we go into July timeframe. So that will be for the ProArt 4080 and for the 4070 Ti. And actually with that, I also do have a note actually on pricing. We do actually have a revision in terms of the pricing for those cards. So the cards actually will be coming in the retail, actually even a little bit lower price than we initially messaged them. So they'll be coming in at $1249 for the 4080 and then $829 for the 4070 Ti. So the ProArt cards, like I said, expect for more information. And again, this was posted in our PCDI group if you're not part of it, but stay tuned, like I said, towards the very end of next month, moving into probably early July in terms of availability. Okay. All right, let me go ahead and check to see if there's any other quick questions there before we get into our next series of cards, which is going to be the GeForce RTX 4060 Ti based graphics cards. We will go from there. So go ahead and do that. So give me 1 second here. And actually, let me just do this just so you can see them kind of side by side. Before we move on from there. So again, we will have these two series of cards right here. Again, the ASUS Radeon RX 7600, the ROG Strix series, and then the ASUS Radeon RX 7600 Dual series. So both of these will be coming out, and you can pretty much get the Dual right now. The ROG Strix will be coming a little bit later. Like I said, 279, and this one be 339. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and jump into our next cards, and this is going to be for the GeForce RTX 4060 Ti. Hey, Justin, thanks so much. Yes, share for JJ. Any solution to add a second NVMe to the Crosshair 7? Yeah, well, I mean, you can already add a second PCI Express. So the Crosshair, the Crosshair Hero, right, already allows for one actually is mapped from the chipset and one's actually mapped from the CPU. So you can already run that configuration without that, but it doesn't matter. I see a lot of people that ask about this, and it's surprising to me because it doesn't actually matter. The reality is you could have a 4080 or a 4090, you could have a 6900 XT, a 6950 XT. It doesn't matter. You can have the fastest GPU on the market right now, and having that GPU perform at by 16 versus having it operate at by 8, there's effectively no difference. In our testing, the actual difference is generally going to be within margin of error, so it's usually maybe within almost about 3 to about 5 frames. In certain GPU compute situations, which would not be for gamers, you can slightly sometimes see a little bit more of that, and that's just because the GPU is more heavily sustained in terms of the bandwidth that's being utilized, right, between the card and the application, and how much is actually kind of going back and forth across the bus. But for gaming, it's not even a factor, and even in that, to get to the point where there is even a little bit of that measurable difference, you have to be running at ultra high refresh rate. So we're talking about not even at 240 hertz. It's actually for our highest performing displays, so like our 360 hertz based displays, and also testing that we're doing for our next generation displays like the 540 hertz. So again, it's not a factor. So again, even if you drop down from by 16 to by 8, you shouldn't be concerned at all. The only other recommendation I'll give you as well, some people kind of wonders like what's the better performing kind of maybe configuration. to be for your PCI Express M.2 SSD configuration. So the link from your chipset as opposed to the link from your CPU is technically has a little bit lower, a little bit more latency. If you measure the performance, it'll probably be pretty similar. But if you technically want the lowest latency, you should run from the CPU. That should probably be your operating system, quote unquote, drive, or where you run your majority of your applications. And then if you want the secondary drive, that would be the one that's be linked to the chipset. Okay. Yep. It wouldn't matter. Like I said, it could be 6900 XT, it could be a 4080, it could be a 4090, it won't matter. Performance is not going to be a factor if you're running at by 8 PCI Express Gen 4. You're entirely fine. Don't even be worrying about it. Okay. All right, guys, let's go ahead and go into our next graphics card. So let's talk about the 4060 series. So we're going to jump into our 4060 Ti. So as you guys know, we of course have been having multiple cards pretty much be coming out the entirety of 2023. So we've had the 4090, we've had the 4080, the 4070 Ti, the 4070, and now Nvidia of course has launched the 4060 Ti and the upcoming 4060, which will actually be positioned underneath the 4060 Ti. So for the 4060 Ti, we've actually got four. That's right, count them, four 4060 Ti based graphics cards. So let's go ahead and take a look at here at our four graphics cards. Give me 1 second here. And give me one moment here. Okay, so yeah. So this is going to be first up right here. We are going to have the ROG Strix series. So we will have the ROG Strix 4060 Ti, and I'll start talking about the differences here between kind of the cards and whatnot in a little bit. We will then have the dual. The dual, it'll be similar to what we previously offered, where we'll have a white and a black edition based dual card. And so this will definitely be a little bit more compact. So again, if you're looking to be able to have something that one stylistically aligns with like a Prime series, or also just looking for something that's more compact, so going into maybe smaller chassis, so micro ATX chassis, mini ITX based chassis, and the most compact ATX chassis, the dual series is definitely going to be the card you're going to want to take a look at. We then have the dual also in black, so we'll have them essentially in white or in black. Dimensionally and feature and function and performance wise, they're going to be identical. It's just pick the one that you want in terms of the color, so white or black. And then last, of course, we're going to have the Tough Gaming series. So the Tough Gaming series will be similar to the ROG Strix series, where it'll be a triple fan design. Also has RGB lighting, where the dual series do not have RGB lighting. Across the board, as always, the Tough Gaming and the ROG Strix cards will feature even higher performing VRMs, higher performing thermal solutions than you are going to have compared to the dual. But rest assured, the dual already going to offer you a very cool, quiet, and performant-based design. So you don't have to be concerned that you're compromising in terms of the quality or the overall experience. It really just comes down to whether or not you value having even lower temperatures. The way I sometimes try to interpret it for users is, think about it like some users, they go like, hey, I just want to have a 360 millimeter AIO. The reality is the difference between a 240 millimeter IO to a 360 millimeter IO is actually pretty small, but some users just like having a little bit of difference in terms of that margin. Also, just like whether you want to have an AIO with RGB fans or no RGB fans. Technically, a lot of times actually the AIO that might not even have RGB fans could actually perform better, because sometimes non-RGB fans can actually have even better airflow and better static pressure. But aesthetics matter to a lot of people in terms of the look and feel. So again, you're going to want to pick the card that also complements kind of the look and feel that you're looking for, right? So let's go through a little bit more clearly the cards that we have here. So we're going to start off again with the dual. So let me go ahead and bring up the dual model. So this will be the first model that we're going to have, like I said, within the 4060 Ti. A really, really nice clean design. I really do like this type of design here. Again, there's no RGB lighting. It has this nice, soft, kind of translucent base top cover that I think really, really adds just a little bit of kind of extra distinctfulness, I think, to the actual design aesthetic that we have here. Again, our Axial Tech ring barrier based design fans that are going to be here. All of the graphics cards are utilizing our ASUS Auto Extreme production process, which is an industry-leading process that we use to be able to actually place all the components, actually validate all of the surface mount components that we're utilizing, whether it's going to be the capacitors or the inductors, all those items, the advanced optical inspection process that we have when we're actually designing and developing the cards. A lot of really cool elements that go into that and all of these. So it doesn't matter which card, whether it's the entry card to the highest end card, they're all utilizing that same production process. You can see from display out, DisplayPort, and then HDMI 2.1. Something you might not realize, we're one of the only manufacturers that actually has full stainless steel 304 that's utilized on our I/O brackets. You might ask, well, what's the point of that? We find actually in some regions that have really, really high humidity levels, it can actually cause oxidation over time, and it can actually weaken it to where it actually can get a little bit of flexing or bending, or also just aesthetically, it doesn't look that great either. You can see right here a nice large high performance heat pipe that's in there, along with the large heatsink assembly. That's going to help to keep the card cool and quiet. Again, an 8-pin PCI Express power connector on the graphics card. All right, so you are going to be good. So that is going to be the dual based graphics card. Now let's go ahead and take a look here at the dual in white. It's going to be the same exact card. I'm just going to show it to you in white here, and then we're going to go into the Tough Gaming. And I really love this profile here, and again, works really, really well, I think, with the Prime Series motherboard. And the nice thing in terms of the compact design, we'll compare the dimensions right here, but definitely if you're going to be looking for a more compact card, I think this is going to be the kind of the big benefit here is going to be for the dual series. So dimensionally, when you're taking a look at the overall dimensions, we can go ahead and bring it up right here. But you can also always check if you head over into our tech specs on our page. You scroll down, you can actually find the information listed for you right here. So you can see this is a 2.5 slot card, right? So pretty compact. And then you can see in terms of dimensions, it's going to be in millimeters, right? And you can actually see just how compact the card is. So this is really, really nice, especially, like I said, for these smaller chassis, or also for maybe users that are going to be using this for maybe the creation side. So maybe acceleration in DaVinci Resolve, maybe in 3D Studio Max, Blender, AutoCAD, applications like that. And maybe you have a secondary card for other purposes as well. The great thing is with these being more compact, you can easily slot in 2 graphics cards. As opposed to larger graphics cards, it's also the reason why we designed and developed the ProArt series in a 2.5 slot fashion, is because you can allow for 2 cards to be installed in a system, while larger cards, once you go into like 3 slots, it pretty much eliminates the ability to be able to run in a multiple GPU configuration for higher end GPUs. Okay, so that is going to be the dual series there. And let me go ahead and, where was I? Dual series. Okay, Tough Gaming. Let's go to the Tough Gaming. And here we can see Tough Gaming. Display I/O configuration is going to be the same. Nice, big, large, of course, vented backplate design that's going to be on here as well. You can definitely see a significantly larger heatsink assembly right here. And so the heatsink assembly is going to be quite a bit larger than what you have on the dual series. And ultimately, that's just going to translate in terms of the overall temperatures, right? You're going to have essentially lower temperatures and quieter operation. Now, some people wonder, well, what's the point of this? And part of it can be is that there's variance just among GPUs. You might not realize that if you took 10 GPUs, some GPUs will be a little bit cooler and some GPUs will be a little bit hotter. So having essentially a higher performing heatsink helps to account for a greater amount of coverage in terms of being consistently lower in terms of temperature across essentially all the GPUs that are produced, even if it's the same GPU, right? In addition to that, also you essentially just have more headroom, that if maybe you have a little bit of a hotter environment, maybe you have a chassis where you don't have necessarily as much airflow, right? Although airflow is important to contribute to the performance of the GPU cooling solution, you essentially are just going to be able to help to keep that card at essentially lower temperatures. So depending on your setup and your situation, it is going to be of a benefit, right? Now, in terms of the card, it's got that nice clean design. You can also see what's called an internal ribbed structure. That structure there is to help to stabilize the card and mitigate things like card sag, and stabilize the overall kind of card as a whole. You do have 2 RGB lighting zones, so one right there and one right there. There's no RGB lighting on the back of the card. So this is how it would generally look. Looks fine if you go with a vertical setup. A lot of people actually like the vertical setup for the Tough Gaming cards, and you can kind of see a little bit of the RGB line accent if you do go with a vertical base mount. And this one, just like the dual series, is also going to be 8-pin PCI Express. Okay. All right, so last but not least, let's go ahead and take a look here at the ROG Strix card. All right. And for the ROG Strix, you're going to see that really nice, beautiful shroud design that we have now for the 40 series, right? You've got that large RGB lighting zone with the Republic of Gamers. The quad LED lighting zone that's going to be on the rear of the graphics card is also going to be present there. Okay, triple fan design, also just like the Tough Gaming base model. That nice, really cool and vibrant new ID design that we have for the 40 series generation. It does have the dual V BIOS design, again, just like the P mode and Q mode that we talked about. Just like it was on the RX 7600, it operates the same here. Same display out configuration. You do get some nice little accessories with this one. So a little bit of cable wrap, the collector's card, the little paper stand there, which you can use as a smartphone kind of holder there if you wanted to, and then also the GPU support, which works as both a screwdriver and as a GPU support. And even larger performing, high performing, essentially heatsink assembly that we have on the ROG Strix model. With even more heat pipes. So again, more heat pipes, more dense assembly, more higher performing, essentially heatsink. And so again, if you're looking for the highest performing option that also has the highest power limit rating, so if you're essentially interested in overclocking, that's where you're essentially going to get a benefit with those cards, especially compared to the dual models. But all the graphics cards can be overclocked and tuned, so it's really up to you, to pick the card that makes the most sense for you. So recapping there in terms of the respective price point, let me go ahead and bring that up. And also, just in case you're wondering, let me go ahead and cover temperature delta if you're kind of just wanting to know a little bit of the difference between kind of the temperature that you might see on one card versus another card. So we do our testing in kind of like a worst case scenario in a specialized thermal chamber. For the thermal chamber, I'm seeing use cases where we're using things like Furmark, which are not representative of games, right? So in games, you actually see generally lower temperatures because they're not running a heavy, consistent load to the GPU in the same way like Furmark is, which it can be almost classified as what's called like a power virus. So on, let's say, the dual card, the dual, you would be probably looking at around probably about like in the mid 60s, so about like 62 to about 65 degrees, right? And then for something like the tough gaming graphics card, you'd probably be talking about the low 60s to mid 60s, so like 60 to 62. Now keep in mind that the clock speeds, of course, on the tough and the ROG Strix card are also higher, right? So there's more to account for there. And also the acoustic profiles are going to be even quieter. So it's not just, of course, the temperature, but it's also the acoustics, right? So the acoustics is on the tough gaming graphics card and the ROG Strix card will be cooler and they'll be quieter. But the great thing is, like I said, baseline, even for that 4060 Ti and that dual card, to me, it's great that even kind of in that extreme scenario, you're going to be seeing about 65 degrees in terms of maximum temperature. And like I said, in realistic game loads, you'll probably be closer to the high, it could be in the mid 50s to like high 50s to even maybe the low 60s. So it's really only kind of in that more extreme scenario that you're starting to look into, like I said, about 65 degrees. Okay. So that's a little bit of a difference there if you're wondering about kind of the temperature deltas between the two. Let's go ahead and show you. Give me 1 second right here. Sorry. Where was this? Oh, yeah. Let's recap the pricing. So in terms of our pricing right here, just to recap again for the dual series, right? $399 or $409. So $10 difference between the black and the white. And then you go into the 4060 Ti for the tough gaming, which is going to be $449, and then $489 for the ROG Strix model, right? So essentially $399 all the way up to $490. Just pick the model that you think makes most sense for you. I think for a lot of people, they're really going to be fans of, like I said, the two dual models and probably the tough gaming model. Hey Marcus, thanks for the feedback regarding the KO series. Right now we don't have any immediate plans to bring any new updated KO based models, but it's definitely, we'll continue to monitor kind of feedback from our users. It's always challenging in terms of the number of GPUs because of course you have to be careful, right, in terms of how many GPUs you're really putting out there, whether there really is going to be sufficient demand for them, and also kind of what's the point relating to that model. One of the reasons why we introduced the prior KO model was because we didn't have as many cards that had kind of RGB lighting before going into the ROG Strix, and we feel that now that we've added a little bit more RGB lighting, at least into the tough card, you have that element of RGB present there, but of course the flare on the KO is definitely a little bit more prominent, so it's kind of like that middle ground between kind of like the dual and then something like the tough gaming, right? But it can be tricky, but definitely appreciate the feedback in that regard. David James notes is that the 4060 Ti can barely run 1080p. That's actually not true. It actually has no problems running 1080p gaming, and actually I consider it to be a very strong card at actually even 1440p. If you actually really look at the performance, right, I think there's a lot of different ways to interpret performance, right, and it really matters on what's the game engine that you're kind of really looking at, right. I think the most generalized perspective is you can look at the top 20 games in, let's say, Steam. If you can run the top 20 games in Steam, that means that it's counting for the largest base of people that are playing games as a whole. But if we do look at, let's say, I'd say, a media reference point that we can look at the overall, I think, performance, right? We can see, take for instance here, if we take a look at like Tech Power Up, at even the reference design, you can see the 1080p performance is actually on average 131 frames. And so that's accounting from everything where you can see from Cyberpunk to Dying Light 2 to Elden Ring to Far Cry to Forza 5 to Spider-Man to The Witcher 3 to Warhammer to Watch Dogs, right? So that's actually very, very healthy performance. That legitimately means that you're in a great level of performance for a 1080p gaming experience with essentially high quality settings. If you want to adjust and balance your settings out there, you can easily be actually going to a much higher frame rate than this. So if you have something like a 1080p, 144 hertz, 165 hertz monitor, this is going to be a great experience for you. And of course, keep in mind, that's not accounting for, of course, frame generation technology. Whether you're a fan or not a fan of it, the benefit that you really have with frame generation is it's an option to you to be able to enable, right? The fact that you have essentially a toggle to even be able to get more performance is a great level of flexibility. And the 4060 Ti, I think, also carries a big advantage that the power efficiency is fantastic. We talked about the RX 7600 being a great card that gives you flexibility to be able to jump into a wide range of systems, especially older builds, where if they've got an older power supply like a 500 watt, 550 watt, 600 watt, similarly here, you're going to be able to jump this into those systems because under real world unit scenarios, you're probably only talking about like 160 to 170 watts in terms of power consumption for the graphics card. So it's quite efficient in terms of that. And then even to 1440p, similarly the 1440p performance, you're still almost nearing 100 frames a second for that 4060 Ti. So that's already quite capable. So again, in those same type of game scenarios, it's going to be offering you a solid experience. Like always, what I tell people is look at the games that you're going to be playing, right? I think that's the most important factor, right? Regardless of, I think any of the information that you see, always base it on what you're ultimately playing and see it. Does that offer you the value and the performance that you're looking for as a user, right? For us, we produce both AMD and Nvidia based graphics cards, the entire kind of pretty much lineup that both companies offer respectively. And we of course also have prior generation cards too, which also see, discounts and promotions too. So, like right now you can also get a 3060, which is a very solid card, not the 3060 Ti, but the 3060 for I think about like $240, which is pretty reasonable. It's not going to be anywhere near as performant as this 4060 Ti or an RX 7600, but it's a solid card that's even cheaper. So again, if you're coming from something maybe like a 1080, right, or a 1060, this is going to be a huge upgrade for you in terms of performance. So I think it just comes down to pick the card that makes the most sense based on your budget and the gameplay experience that you're looking for. Hey, Avi, we actually already covered that in a prior update. The beta update was just that. It's actually a beta update that all manufacturers released that contained a new AGISA. At the same time, we actually also had a formal release that also contained the SoC voltage guidance. So a few points is one, that beta notification has been removed, and we already released actually a full PR that openly told, and no other motherboard manufacturers actually stated this, but we are fully letting users know if you enable Expo, AMP, DOCP on your motherboard for Intel or AMD, we've fully communicated for you. You're 100% covered. If you're watching us on YouTube or on Facebook, there's actually a link to this exact post that we have in the description. So for that, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our service and support team. But all AM5 motherboards right now, you don't need to download any respective beta. You can either download the original release that we had even prior to the beta, which was the end of April, I believe the 27th. So that would be like the 1300 series release, which contained the SoC voltage guidance implementation, or the latest AGISA 1007.A release, which is available for all AM5 motherboards, which contains the new AGISA and also that same SoC voltage implementation. And again, as I noted, we are fully committed to supporting any of our customers, and if they have any questions, they can feel free to reach out to us if they have any questions in that respect. You can also, like I said, find those links in the description. If you're checking us out on YouTube, that will go ahead and note to you actually our formal press release statement that we issued to kind of make sure that users are fully aware that they are covered in that respect, so there shouldn't be any questions or concerns in that regard. All right, let me go ahead and just see if we have any other quick questions there on the 4060 Ti series. Hey James, I wouldn't say that they're fake frames, right? I mean, you have to remember that the way that actually DLS works is it actually takes real frame data, right? And that frame data is actually then what it is using to create the actual rendered frames, right? So I think it's not accurate to present them as fake frames. You can say that they're not 100% rendered frames from the game engine, right? So they are essentially an assisted generated based frame, but there is actual true frame data. The reason why it actually can work the way as it does is you do actually have to reference motion data. You actually have to render actual real game data, and that has to be consistently actually done and processed through the GPU. It's also part of the reason why the 20 series doesn't have essentially DLSS 3, excuse me, the 30 series and the 20 series don't have DLSS 3 versus the 40 series, because there's a physical component within the GPU architecture that actually requires that. But regardless of that, even if you don't want to use frame generation, you don't want to use DLSS, or same thing on AMD, you don't want to use FSR, if you just want to use a card from a pure raster perspective, right? You're still talking about very performance-based card. Those numbers that we talked about there don't include any frame generation data. For me, I enjoy frame rate. I have no issues using something like DLSS. I also like RTX technologies. I also like things, you know, a lot of other features that are part of the graphics card. So I look at a kind of a graphics card from a holistic experience. But of course, you can leverage the features and the functions you want from the card that you feel are going to be most advantageous to you, right? H2O is, when does the 4060 Ti release? It's out right now, so you can go ahead and actually pick up the cards right now. Not all of them are available, so you'll see the availability actually increase over the coming days, but you can also go ahead already and pick up cards right now. So you can check out the ASUS store, you can check out Newegg, you can check out Amazon for corresponding actually listings for those cards. The dual card is our immediate kind of most broadly available card, followed up by the Tough Gaming graphics card, and then you'll see broader availability for the ROG Strix card a little bit later. But that will probably be in a smaller quantity compared to, let's say, the Tough Gaming or the ROG Strix graphics card. Hey Marcus, are the Strix GPU dies higher bins? You know, when people ask this question, I think you kind of have to understand that the important way to kind of understand the difference between card series, right, is that there's multiple things that differentiate the card. So it's not just the pure GPU. But when you talk about quote unquote binning, there's a lot of ways that people want to interpret binning. The best way to just represent when you're talking about how the GPU itself differs from, let's say, the dual model to the Tough Gaming model to the ROG Strix model, is that we have to essentially validate the clock speed on an OC model, right? And so while on a dual model or a Tough Gaming model, right, you might be able to potentially overclock it, right? There's a fundamental difference that at production, you're essentially guaranteeing that that GPU is able to hit that clock frequency. Not all GPUs will, right? So regardless that you have the ability to overclock to it, it doesn't guarantee you. And so in that regard, right, I won't say that it's necessarily better, because better can be interpreted a lot of different ways. You could have a situation where you have actually a GPU that actually overclocks better, but it's actually referred to as more leaky. So a leakier GPU could actually produce a little bit more heat. It could actually use a little bit more voltage, but it could actually clock a little bit better. And you can actually have the inverse. You could have CPUs that are really, really tight and they're actually not leaky and they run actually nominally cooler, but they actually maybe clock not as high, right? Now, is one better or is one worse? It really comes down to your preference as a user. Some people go like, I care most about temperature. Other people I care most about clock speed. And then also depends on the design, right? If I've got enough thermal dissipation performance, even if the card's a little bit leakier, it doesn't really matter to me because I can keep it cool always, right? But I think the main point to keep in mind objectively is that when we're essentially designating a card as an OC card, right, from the factory, we have to validate and ensure that it meets stability for the user, because there is no them having to engage or enable the overclock, right? It is essentially when they install the driver, we've programmed that clock speed into the vBIOS and it's validated at that speed. So it's an assured level of performance. So hopefully that answers your question in that regard. All right. Let me see if there's any last questions there. If not, I think we are going to be good to go there in terms of the ROG Strix, of the 4060 Ti based graphics cards, guys. All right, so that covers us there in terms of those new cards. So again, as a quick recap, let's go ahead and quickly just last look again at the graphics cards that we've got here in terms of the range. So again, we've got two new RX 76 based graphics cards right there, one coming in at $279.99 and the other coming in at $339.99. So the Dual or the ROG Strix. Going into the Nvidia side, we have 4 different models with the 4060 Ti. So going in from $399 to $409 to $449 to $489. And again, the dual models, they are going to be exactly the same. It's just the difference of one being white and the other one being black. All right. All right, let me see one other question that we have right there. Andreas says, should I get ice cream or resist the temptation? I'd say give into the temptation, man. There's nothing wrong with having a little bit of ice cream, especially if it's some good ice cream. So why not? Although, let me know in the chat. Are you a fan of gelato or are you a fan of ice cream? Which one do you like, right? We'll see. All right, guys, let me go ahead and bring up my last item here. Let's see if we have a little bit of time to go ahead and jump into the PCDIY Builder Spotlight, and we will go from there. So give me 1 second here. Let me see here if I have our submission form. All right, let me see if I can bring this up here. While I go ahead and do that, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to go ahead and let me know, and I will do my best to go ahead and see if I can answer those for you guys. So give me 1 second here. Let's see if I can bring up our submission form. Okay, and bring this up here. And if you guys are not familiar with what we do in terms of the PCDIY Builder Spotlight, this is essentially where you have the opportunity to have your system featured here on the stream. All you need to do to go ahead and get in on it is essentially just join our PCDIY group, check out the actual featured announcement post, and then we actually have a submission form. The submission form will allow you to go ahead and submit your system so that we can go ahead and feature it on the stream. There's pretty much no requirement except that it, of course, has to have some ASUS components within it. The minimum is, of course, an ASUS motherboard, and ideally, of course, we'd love to feature systems that have ASUS motherboard and graphics card. From there, of course, it can be air-cooled, water-cooled, mini ITX, ATX. It doesn't really matter. Anything in between, we featured them all. So we'd love to be able to see your build, and so feel free to go ahead and submit it if you do have an ASUS powered system. All right, let me go ahead and see right here. All right, so actually, it looks like the file that I had here, I no longer have it. So give me 1 second to bring it. Let me see if I can bring this back up again. Sorry guys, I just moved over this to a new system and I didn't realize that I had moved that off. Okay, I think I have the file here. Perfect. Okay, this will work. Okay, so this is going to be from, I believe, Tantrix Mods. So let me go ahead and just put this in here. Let's go ahead and do that. And I don't think this one has a, I don't think it has a name. So we're just going to put ROG Strix and then the chassis. So I think this is an H510. Okay, there we go. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here at the system. This one's a pretty cool one. It's got a really cool kind of bold and bright color scheme, which is pretty fun. I think it's always nice to be able to see kind of something that is a little bit different, although at the same time, I think the color scheme on this is going to be pretty kind of reminiscent of the very kind of synthwave colors that a lot of people have kind of been going with for the builds for a time. So, all right, so let's go here, and there we go. All right, there we go. So right now we can go ahead and see here. It's got the, of course, NZXT chassis right there. And also those are the NZXT, I think, AR fans right there. I really like the look of the AR fans. There's not that many fans that actually have this kind of look, even though they're quite old. They've been around for, I guess, the AR fans, maybe, what, like 5+ years. They have this really kind of cool diffused ring there that gives them really kind of a softer vibe, which is nice. Now, a lot of the newer fans, you generally see LED lighting within the housing right here, so they tend to have a more fleshed out look, right? But this nice little kind of halo accent I think is nice because it doesn't necessarily provide too bright or too bold of a kind of presence, but it does give you a nice little bit of spotlighting. The only bummer right here is because this is a little bit more compact chassis, you do lose a little bit of the visibility right here, I think, within the IO shroud, but overall really, really nice. This chassis isn't really super designed to be able to mount kind of a full 240mm AIO. You can't go in the top, so you have to do a front base mounted configuration, but I think this works. Swooping up into the DRAM there is really, really nicely done. Tantrix always does a really clean job in terms of their layout, so I think they did a great job here. I really love the RGB light bar that we've got right there on the 30 series card, kind of bold and bright, really, really cool. I think it's the best orientation for this card, although you do get the cool kind of little silhouette lighting if you do put it vertically. And then a really nice job here with the bridge cable comb. So overall, just clean, bold, and bright, really nicely done. No complaints there. Moving out to kind of the full shot of the system right there, you can definitely see that it's got the vibes right there with, of course, the pink, the purples, and the blues. Really, really cool. I'd love to see what your guys' thoughts in right here. This is pretty interesting where they actually have that front panel design, right? And then it's got some visibility, some transparency to it. You can see the fans, but then you also have the etching. And this is kind of similar to what we see sometimes people do in the Hyperion, in the Helios chassis, where the Helios actually has a front tempered glass panel. And that panel essentially has its own design. And some people will keep the fans that come in there that allow the pattern to be really visible, and then other people will put RGB fans in there. And it's cool because it gives a little bit of a contrast lighting or kind of little backfill, but I feel it takes away from some of the legibility. And here I'm torn. I really love all the work that this was done right here, and I almost feel that I would love it even more without the fans. The fans I think look really, really cool though, and they add a symmetrical vibe to it. So I could kind of go either which way, but what do you guys think? Do you guys like having the fans there, or do you think it would look cooler to maybe be able to see the full design without the fans in there? It'd almost be awesome to be able to see kind of a picture with both configurations, so maybe the fans off and then the fans on. But overall, really, really cool color vibes throughout there, and I love the consistency of the color scheme throughout the build. It looks really, really nice in this respect, right? So moving here a little bit more, you can definitely see it's got a really nice, clean, compact vibe to it. Really nice color scheme and layout, and I think it works fans. So Tech is giving us some feedback right there. He goes, he likes it with the fans. And then Tom Thompson is giving us some without the fans. So we got a 50-50 split there. So it looks like we need somebody else to come in and help to go ahead and break up the consistency between whether people think that it should be with the fans or without the fans. From there, you can see pretty nice, clean layout, right? You've got, of course, some Team Force memory in there. The Deltas, I really like the way that the Deltas look. They have that really nice, clean, diffused lighting design, which is really nice. My favorite, though, might be the the Nighthawk dims from Team Group. They have a really cool kind of trace line, which I really, really like. I think it almost fits the ROG Strix design a little bit more than the Deltas, but these look great. I definitely don't have any issues here. I mean, overall, it's clean, it's nice, it's well executed. I mean, there's nothing to niggle at here. I mean, of course, they're pros. It's a fantastic job. It's a great looking build. That customization right there in the front really helps to just add in kind of another vibe to the system that I think is really cool. So overall, 100% thumbs up. Really nice job from Chantrix Mods right there. So Michael gives some feedback. He says actually no fan, so that means just having that full panel be visible. Miguel also says actually no fans. And then a Facebook user says like the fans, yay RGB. And then Vitor says no RGB. So wow, we're going back and forth there. I think we got one extra vote, which is for no RGB, and almost 50-50. But where I think right now we'd be like 60-40, right? 60 saying it looked maybe a little bit better without the RGB fan, and then the other 40% would be with the RGB. But either which way, it looks great. And the other cool thing is, of course, with RGB, you can change the lighting. So it could be also interesting to see what it looks like if maybe you went with like a white soft light and maybe use that as a little bit backdrop and you fill that out. But overall, I really love the color scheme. It's a fantastic build. It looks great. Let me go ahead and bring up the actual hardware specifications here for the system so we can actually see what is running in this build. So give me a second. And we'll throw up a couple of images right here. So maybe those two. Yeah, those two are pretty cool. All right, and let's see what we've got going here. So in terms of the core components, so this is, of course, an ROG Strix kind of themed build right there. It's all inside of an NZXT H510 Elite. In terms of the actual CPU configuration, we've got a Core i7 11700K. Now this was from a build from 2021, so again, guys, it's not like it's a current build. It's just an older build that they completed, but I still think it looks fantastic. An ROG Strix B560F. That's pretty cool because that means it's a cool balance there. It's interesting to use a K series part on a B series based motherboard in that regard, but you know, hey, it works. It's entirely fine. 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3600 MT from Senti Team Group T-Force. We then have an ROG Strix 3070 Ti based graphics card, then a 250 gigabyte M.2 SSD, and then also another 1 terabyte M.2 SSD, and then a Kraken Z63 ARGB, of course, based cooler, and that's all powered by a 750 watt power supply, and then FTW custom sleeved cables. Overall, that's a cool build. I mean, even right now, that's still a very performant build, right? I mean, you could still play anything on the market with that system and be able to have a really nice, enjoyable experience. And I think that's the most important part, right? At the end of the day, if you're happy with your system, it's running well, and you're enjoying it, enjoy it, right? If you build a system, if you upgrade your system, there's no point to kind of keep always changing it if you're not enjoying it, right? You ultimately want to just enjoy your build, right? Whether it's going to be for gaming, whether it's going to be for productivity, for general use, whatever it might be. So overall, Tantrix mods, man, very cool build. Gets a thumbs up from me. Nicely done. Oh, sorry, maybe I bumped my mic there. Oh, maybe it bumped there. If you can let me know if the volume level is there okay. I might have just bumped it there. So no worries in that regard. All right, guys. So not too much time there that I have for essentially running into other builds that we've got for the PCDIY Builder Spotlight, but hopefully that gets you taken care of there. As always, guys, if you guys are interested in submitting your build for the PCDIY Builder Spotlight, just feel free to go ahead and drop them into, of course, the PCDIY group. Check out the actual Google submissions forms that we have there, and we'd love to be able to feature your system. All right, guys, so that pretty much covers us in terms of our PCDIY Builder Spotlight. So if you guys have, of course, any other questions, comments, feedback, feel free to go ahead and drop them in the chat. We'll do our best to go ahead and follow up with you guys, and I can. Or you can also go ahead and, like I said, check us out in our PCDIY group. So with that, take care, take it easy, enjoy the rest of your day, have a fantastic weekend, and hopefully enjoy some gaming. I think, what is it? What's the new game that just came out? It's a new game. I don't know, for me, hopefully I may be able to check out some Company Heroes 3. I know they just issued the big update, but there's what am I forgetting? It's one. Hopefully I'll think about it and I'll remember it and I'll talk about it next week. But it's a pretty cool indie game that I was pretty excited about. All right, guys, take care, take it easy, enjoy the rest of your day, and make sure to watch out for some really cool stuff that we've got coming from Computex 2023. All right, guys.